The scene is set in the Odyssey Casino. John Stanhope has let it be known that a social gathering for the Primogen will be happening this evening. John has prepared many new beverages and delightful entertainment for his guests. However, one of the Primogen has contacted him saying he has business that will not wait. Therefore, before any of the others arrive, John prepares a small table out the back for Mr. Ramsay Brody Innes. And the scene begins.
Ramsay arrives at the casino in his ghoul Mr. Lynch's car, nods at him to wait outside in the kind of parking area, makes his way in. But now he's well known to the security staff here, who escort him quickly through. He maintains his usual commanding, business-like demeanour, and walks purposefully, carrying his usual sort of briefcase by his side, his long black coat and his slick back hair. He allows himself the slightest of smiles as he sees John Stanhope sitting awaiting him at the table, which is pretty much the very definition of pleasantries when it comes to Ramsay Brody Innes. He crosses the floor of the casino, not stopping to enjoy any of the distractions that are being prepared to his left and right, and makes his way directly to the table, where he places his briefcase down by the proffered chair and extends his hand across the table. Mr. Stanhope, good evening. Thank you for seeing me so promptly.
Mr. Brody Innes, he says, giving the hand a firm shake. Please sit down. It is a long time since we've had a chance to converse. Can I offer you a drink? I have to say I am quite pleased with this one.
Ramsay very delicately lowers himself into the chair and sort of takes the edge off it for a moment, and then examines the selection of beverages in front of him, deciding to sort of humour his host to some extent. Why, it would be impolite to not even try it. And he takes the nearest glass to himself, sort of swirls it around for a moment, looking at the thickness, the texture of the blood, and then he takes a small sip and breathes in through his nose as he does so, and then takes a larger sort of gulp. Presumably the form in some cases with wine would be to not swallow it, but I don't think Kindred quite see it that way. He knocks it back with a firm gulp, allowing the aftertaste to come through. Then he gently places the glass back down in front of him. It's a boy. He says, a pleasant surprise.
Yes, quite by accident, I will assure you. My retainer, Jason, in his usual fits within the gym, came across the young man, Hawaiian by descent, quite the boxing amateur pro. I've called it Hawaiian Punch, but you can tell from the dietary requirements enforced upon him that exotic flavour of citrus and fruits comes through with a heady punch and a relaxing aftertone, indicating physical prowess and a relaxed posture through victory.
Ramsay runs his tongue across his top set of fangs, taking off any residue of the vitae that may be left there, enjoying every last drop of it. Yes, one can almost taste the protein of his muscles. Fascinating. I had been, I admit, sceptical as to the flavour of blood which is bottled and preserved, and while it may not be as rich and wholesome as I'm sure it would be were I to acquire this boy, it is nonetheless a fair enough approximation to warrant my personal endorsement. Ramsay smiles thinly again.
John smiles politely, but the implication that he needs the Tremere Primogen's endorsement for his work is a barb that John swallows for the moment. Just because the Kine go on leaps and bounds before us in their technological and especially their mass production and civilization does not mean we have to be left behind in the barbaric Dark Ages. We are not Gangrel, Mr. Brodianus. We embrace the future.
Indeed we do. Ramsay sort of glances at his briefcase for a fleeting moment and sort of thinks of his brother and his dusty old tomes, and then glances back up again. And of course the future is why we must speak.
Do go on. How have you been keeping? I hear all sorts of whispers about the Tremere clan. Many of your own have been passing through these doors very recently, asking for something or another.
Yes, they would have been. My brother tells me you were helpful in that regard also. I had a feeling that someone would talk. They were at least sensible enough not to talk directly to members of the clan, but nonetheless, I look forward to exacting an appropriate punishment. Still, it is a trifle compared to the state of the city at large.
I'm glad to see that the higher purpose of the city and the sect are forefront in your mind, especially when it comes to slights of honor, Mr. Brodianus. I, as much as anyone, can appreciate that it is difficult to keep things in perspective.
As you say, we are not Gangrel. And he smiles thinly again.
John smirks at that, a little self-satisfied, thinking that of the incompetence of the Seneschal and the fact that he's doing his job amuses him. So, how goes your clan? Many of them have piqued my interest, as it were. One of them was audacious enough to admit that he had been snooping into my background.
Told you, did he? Interesting. We have asked Apprentice Smith to gather as much information in the kindred of the city as is possible. This is not a, shall we say, specific targeting of yourself. Merely a intelligence gathering operation on each and every one we can. It pays to remain informed as to the comings and goings. I'm sure you can appreciate that.
Why, the only person that you need to understand more than your enemies is your friends, Mr. Brodianus.
Indeed, and a complete understanding is always useful. Speaking of our friends, have you heard from the Prince of Lut?
He has been exceedingly absent, and as for his Seneschal, twice as much so. The only thing I hear from the court is the ramblings and ravings of the sheriff getting into some trouble or another.
Yes, a poor replacement for Apprentice Broodmore. Nonetheless, we must make do with what we have for now. And when he says for now, he sort of gives a very purposeful look across the table. He's at this point, you notice he's kind of reached down into his the side pocket of his briefcase and has slid out a copy of a kind of tabloid sort of newspaper stroke magazine. He slides it across the table to you. It's a copy of the Old Statesman. You imagine he's just ensuring that you are going to get his latest coded message.
John will have a look at it. If Miss Brodianus has any empathy at all or ability to study John, you'll notice from his last meeting he's His front is still perfect and his etiquette is unformed, but when his mind wanders or he concentrates, there's a much more stillness to him, a darker cast to his eyes, certainly a more predatory nature about him since when you first saw him. He reads the message quickly and decodes it.
Essentially, without going right into the details of exactly the wording of the letter, it essentially says that Ramsay has noted the absence of many court members. He is encountering, despite our insistence upon the Primogen sponsoring each new kindred he encounters, it seems a new kindred with each passing night. He has taken all of them into his care as he finds them, as he believes this is his duty as Primogen, as decreed. Although he is beginning to think that your plans for a change of management may need to be accelerated before things get out of hand. There are oblique references towards the possibility that the freedom for these neonates to come and go and do as they please indicate the anarch leanings of the current incumbent.
Just so. I too have had many strafes and ways coming through the casino doors to be kept up. Yet I also encounter anarchs and independents that do not report to a Primogen. It seems rather a hypocrisy that shall not stand. How come loyal Camarilla members must deal with such regulations, but those who do not fall under umbrella get to run around freely with no enforcement?
Yes. It seems these new arrivals can go around doing whatever they like. That will stop. It will begin with this Nosferatu, and the example that I make of him will serve as testament to the others. The time for freedom is over. The Sabbat could return at any time. The independents seemingly own most of this city. It is not meet. I am glad we agree on this point. And when the administration fails, it falls upon those few who have the skill and the will to take charge.
Just so. I will be reporting to the Ventru High Council in a few days, a week at most. It would help our case when approaching the higher Camarilla if I could have a written endorsement from the Tremere over the state of the city.
I will contact Archon Petrov. I believe he is nearby. It will seem, shall we say, in the best interests of the sect for those with the city's best interests at heart to take charge. If nothing else, they will lean on Eudosha and see that he begins doing his job.
Quite. For that end, Primogen Brodius, I ask that you spare the lash, at least as much as I'm sure you are expecting to be able to give. An example on this young Nosferatu will not serve. He came to me and confessed his guilt willingly. He understands that his punishment is due, and my word, he will pay, Mr. Brodianis. But to crucify a young member of the Camarilla will send the wrong message to the other neonates, who are currently leaderless.
Crucifixion. I had not considered crucifixion. I'm sure he would survive it, though. Unless I left him out too long. And he seems to drift off into a thought, and then smiles, and then the smile drops off his face again. But no, I have other ideas for this gentleman. Better ideas.
Yes, crucifixion seems the old regime of Tremere, certainly not the progressive Tremere that we have now in the city.
Indeed not. And we are not quite so fond of crosses as the previous lot. Still, an example must be made, but the correct example. I have in mind certain punishments. The first of which will be, and you notice he says will be, not he proposes, that this, I'm assuming, leaderless neonate will come under the patronage of myself. To ensure loyalty, he will submit to a bond of the blood to myself. Furthermore, the ghoul with which he harmed a member of my clan shall be released to House Tremere, and we will consider the matter closed.
A most just punishment, I feel. One that I'm sure Miss Virginia will not argue the point too much.
I'm sure they may argue, but they will not be heeded in their argument. This, I believe, is an appropriate and just punishment, which allows everyone to save some face. I have in mind also a small, trifling demonstration, in the sense that at a court gathering, or the nearest convenient court gathering, this individual will confess his guilt to the court and apologise.
A loss in status is expected, and a public demonstration of damn, the word seems to escape me, of subjugation.
Indeed.
That's the word.
It will be enough for the prestige and status of my clan to see that this individual who attempted to besmirch our good name has been humbled before us, as is fitting.
Geoffrey, can you bring in Mr. Summers, please?
Ramsay stiffens slightly. He didn't know he was here.
I thought you would probably wish to speak with the young man and get to the heart of this before. There's something always satisfying having an apology face to face, don't you agree? It's a gentlemanly way of doing things.
Of course, and of course, a true gentleman, and he sort of flourishes with his hand as he says that, would deliver the means and the terms of a man's punishment directly to him and not through a proxy.
Just so.
Ramsay sits back in his chair and waits.
After a few moments, a man in the ghoul brings in a man in a decently expensive suit, or at least it seems. Anyone looking at the cameras would notice that it's really a cheap knockoff, but can't really tell that unless you break through the mask. He carries himself a little tensely. He nods to Mr. Stansope and Mr. Bodianus. You called for me, Mr. Stansope?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Summers. We have been discussing your punishment. I think this will be an apt time for you to say your piece. Your reasons why, and of course your heartfelt apology for your foolishness. Perhaps your words will sway Mr. Bodinus into a more lighter punishment, but do not hold your breath.
I never do. I've learned not to. Out of character, just scrub that. I have no idea what I was saying. Eric will give a respectful bow to Mr. Brodianus. Mr. Brodianus, I must humbly apologize for allowing money for a prank to get in the way of proper gentlemanly behavior, especially behavior towards the great clan. He thinks for a moment, still not because he never got an answer from Apprentice Schmidt on whether or not they call themselves clan or house Tremere. He pauses for a moment, like, clan Tremere. And I understand that it was an incredibly foolish action on my part, and I am quite prepared for any punishment you may see fit.
Ramsey just sort of locks you with his eyes for the entire time you're speaking, but waits until you're finished.
He continues, like, I was approached after the Prince's Elysium, the last one we had, and by a man. He gives a very vague. He basically gives the description that John gave him of Lucius, I believe. He says, okay, that man approached me and said it would be a fun prank, which obviously should have been my first clue that it was not neither fun nor a prank. A fun prank to play on, well, you in particular. He seemed very interested that you would be the specific party.
Interesting.
You notice he doesn't really mention the his ghoul shooting. Like, I did, although I hear it's the Giovanni mostly interested in the hospital that I botched up. I believe that is the only thing I have. Those are the only sins I have committed against your clan. And you notice it is rather sincere when he says he thinks they're the only sins. So is it may not there are the identities of Alistair and James may not have been revealed to his ghoul at all.
While Mr. Summers speaks his piece to Primogen the Tremere, Geoffrey the Ghoul whispers in John's ear, saying that there is another guest waiting to enter, Miss Virginia. John waves Geoffrey away, saying to bring her in once she is ready.
Ramsey sort of takes a moment and then leans forward on the table and speaks. It was foolish with any motivation to think that such a prank, as you say, was wise. Not only my identity, but the masquerade itself was endangered by this action. Given your youth and inexperience, however, and the fact that you were coerced, so to speak, you're like somewhat unconvinced by the they paid me thing. Not that he doesn't believe it's true, he just doesn't think it's a very good excuse. I am prepared to in the fullness of time, a commodity of which we have lots. Put this matter behind us. But there will be certain requirements. First of all, this ghoul of yours who fired upon members of my clan.
At that, Eric will just get a very, very puzzled look. Members of your clan? He looks quizzically.
Yes, members of my clan. Ramses goes on, unperturbed. I would wish for this ghoul to be turned over to us. She will not be harmed, or he will not be harmed, whichever. However, there are tasks we require to be performed, and we need a neutral party to perform them. This will be considered reparation for that particular breach. In the matter of myself, merely, shall we say, a public pronouncement to the court that you, very much as you've said to myself, are acting in full contrition of your actions. And as you are a new neonate in the city, I will take you under my purview. And to that end, and he pulls the glass that he was drinking from back towards him. It still has a healthy sort of serving of the Vitae in it, and then he pulls one of the kind of empty glasses and he takes the bottle with the Hawaiian punch and looks at it and sort of smiles as he pours you a glass. It's a healthy serving and tops his own up. I say that you, to show good faith, should drink to this arrangement. And he bites into his wrist and he drops the blood into the cup.
Before the
wound closed.
Before the blood is consumed, John will stand. Miss Virginia, please come in.
Virginia Lucas enters, shambling, wearing a long, coarse robe. She's about 5'4", Midwestern girl, except horribly misshapen face, reeking of the Nosferatu smell. She says, "Stop."
When Ramses sees Jesse actually stands up. A lady is present.
Virginia walks through. She says, "I understand that one of my charges is being accused of something. I would like to know what is going on."
Miss Lucas, apologies to start without you. Mr. Summers, he says, putting a companionship hand on his shoulder, came to me and confessed a rather serious crime when it came to pretending and framing Mr. Brody Innes. He wishes to have this matter settled, and so I have taken it upon myself to act as mediator between the two parties. Mr. Brody Innes, in his graciousness, has decided to spare full charges against Mr. Summers in exchange for some minor reparations.
Eric, is this true?
Yes, Eric recounts the same story he just told Ramsey, although this time he says, and apparently the security guard that my ghoul shot was also Tremere. If Ramsey was, he probably notices that he refers to his other ghoul.
Ramsey doesn't really care, he lets you just carry on.
Virginia's going to make a self-control roll. That the Nosferatu have been chained. So standard difficulty, I guess.
Well, it's not unless you're really insulted. It'll be DC 8. Otherwise, it'll be like DC 5.
Okay, I'll take 5.
the potent bitch slap.
Okay, she's shaking, and she takes a stake out from her robe, and she's like, if this Nosferatu has brought shame upon the name of Nosferatu, which I've tried so hard to build us as a group, I will torpor this person myself.
Ramsay looks quite satisfied with that pronouncement, and genuinely looks quite impressed with Virginia's, shall we say, adherence to court etiquette in this matter. But he decides to be plaintive. He kind of raises his two hands and shakes his head. While I admire your fervour, Ms. Lucas, it is not necessary to harm Mr. Summers. I believe there can be hope for him yet, and he can become the Nosferatu that you would wish him to be.
She takes the stake, she brings it up to Eric, she places it by his collarbone, and she says, Eric Summers, did you violate the masquerade?
Eric will think about it. Like, I think those parts have been, the masquerade has been covered over, I believe. As far as he knows, it's been covered over. He can't think of anything. Of course, he's also young.
Any masquerade breaches were contained at a modest spend of resource, and yet such things should not be allowed to continue. The young must be kept in check. I am proposing to take Mr. Summers as one of my personal wards until such time as he proves he can shed his fledgling status and rejoin kindred society as a full neonate.
Yes, but he has proven to me that he is not worthy of neonate status at this point. So you shall have him as a fledgling, but he will not be granted status.
I fully agree. Ramsay smiles, not so thinly this time. He seems genuinely pleased with this response.
Just so, as it should be.
I must say, Miss Lucas, I had expected you to be somewhat more resistant. You are a credit to your clan, and a friend to Clan Tremere. Always remember that.
Let's just say I choose who my enemies are carefully, and I don't try to make them by accident. Now, since we're doing a exchange program, so to speak, perhaps you can send someone our way.
That would be agreeable. I could, I'm sure, discuss the matter with several of our young apprentices, find one who is suitable to be your ward.
Yeah, if it seems like something that you can do, perhaps we can learn from each other. Perhaps Eric can teach you something. But right now, I'm too angry at him.
Well, and Ramsay takes another glass, and he pours Virginia a glass of the Hawaiian punch as well. This time he's soaked on his arm. He's not going to chance it there. And he hands one to Virginia, and he gives the previously quite openly poisoned glass to Eric with an expectant look, and picks up his own and raises his glass. I'll take this one, there you go. Raises his glass and simply says, "To the Camarilla, gentlemen and lady."
So the Camarilla.
Okay, Virginia does not drink. She makes a point of never drinking something offered to her. She doesn't care what Eric does, but she'll pretend.
As Ramsay drinks, he's like looking directly at Eric over the glass. With a great deal of expectancy on his face. And he's run away!
I would love to just warn him not to be blood bonded to you, but I'm gonna play it out.
Well,
yes, indeed.
we'll come back to what he does in a moment. Oh, now that
I didn't actually poison your glass anyway, man, so you're cool.
The quite obviously poisoned glass that you offered.
Now that that unpleasant business is sorted, shall we go back into what this meeting was supposed to be? A social gathering of Primogen for us to converse and help each other out, especially since there have been so few of these.
Oh, he's alive.
Mr. Summers, I know you're probably a petty veto, but try and compose yourself.
Daniel, are you going to allow yourself to become level 1 blood bonded to the Tremere?
Eric is... Yeah. Out of character, sorry, when people come in, they're loud and they don't care that I'm on the computer.
That's all right.
Alright, Eric, is going to... He pauses a moment, and it's like, Mr. Brodianus, would it be possible to also give an apology to the unfortunate victim of the hospital shooting, who was part of your clan? He also deserves an apology as well.
Yes, I will pass on your regards. Now, drink. And he looks at you quite expectantly.
Eric is honestly pretty sure if he doesn't, he's going to be turned into a toad. He doesn't really know anything about the Tremere, although he wouldn't put it past him.
Eric, Virginia's going to say, Eric, if you don't want to stand on formality, that's okay. We've already made our agreement. You don't need to drink if you don't want to.
Oh, but he does need to drink. And Ramsay's still not taking his eyes off Eric at this point.
It is a small price for the continued alliance between the strongest clans in the city.
Eric will... Oh, I suppose he'll drink it. Oh, just for fun. He'll... Like, well, to that alliance, then he's not really sure what to do, and he's pretty sure everything will go to hell if he doesn't. So, even if it wouldn't go to hell, but he does drink.
Ramsay smiles, satisfied, and places his own glass back down on the table. Wonderful. Now then, and he sits back down in his chair. Actually, he'll wait for Virginia to sit first, playing out his etiquette. In fact, if there's not a chair there, he'll pull one over for her and sort of hold it out for her.
Virginia always kind of looks like she's sitting in her robe because she's so misshapen, but she scuttles over to a chair.
Once she's taken her place, Ramsay will take his.
Excellent. We're as good as friends as ever we were.
Yes, of course. We can put all of this business behind us at last. As for the Giovanni, I will speak with them personally. Ramsay appears to go off into that world of crucifixion again.
So, gentlemen, I haven't had a chance to, gentlemen and lady, apologies. I haven't had a chance to catch up with any of you, seeing as there's been no Elysiums. I am meeting with the Censure later this evening. Is there any issues you wish for me to bring forth to the... And he takes a moment and smirks a little as he rolls the word around in his mouth. Court.
I would simply commend to them that this issue is dealt with. And it will further enhance, in the eyes of officialdom, or what little there is of it here, that at least some of us are doing our jobs. And as he says that, he kind of nods to Virginia and smiles back to Stanhope again, as he is pleased to be in the company of people who can get things done for once.
Virginia states that if the Seneschal needs to know any information about any systems in the city.
1 second. Google Hangout just crashed. Yeah, the whole thing crashed.
But we're back.
Apologies. And this brief interlude. We get our bars up again.
And now for your entertainment, the Tremere clan dancers. And now back to the scene. So, right.
Miss Virginia, what were you saying? Apologies.
Merely that I have quite a network. As a Nosferatu, I should. But I've developed it, made my roles on camera, so to speak. And if the Seneschal or any one of you needs information, come to me. The price, whether it be labor, money, or love, will be reasonable.
That is reassuring to know, Miss Lucas. The Nosferatu are once again taking their usual spot within the city. Is there anything I can do, or my clan can do, to help you along this path? A Camarilla city is not quite the same without a strong Nosferatu present.
I want to make a formal request for a domain.
Which domain are you looking at?
I prefer hotels.
If it's hotels you seek, the Ventru have a chain of hotels.
Lodging, yes. Since some of my fellow Nosferatu insist on living in the sewers, I want to show them that that's not for all of us. That the Primogen, for example, does not live in the sewer.
Well, I can more than happily give away one of the chains of the hotels. Call it a favor between friends.
I thank you. This will forge a bond between the Venture and the Nosferatu.
I may be overstepping my rank, so to speak, but if I may, Miss Lucas, I would like to offer a friendly piece of advice, one Primogen to another. Given your network, as you say, there may be a use that it could be brought into effect for the city, not for myself. There have been, you may have noticed, a great number of new arrivals to the city, and we are, shall we say at the moment, more inwardly focused on our own affairs. It may be that it would enhance your status, shall we say, with the court, and certainly with myself and Mr. Stanhope, I'm sure. If you and your network and your clan brothers and sisters indeed would keep an eye out for new arrivals and be watchful of any new kindred to arrive. These are trying times in this part of the world, and we must keep a watch for whoever may arrive and what agenda they may be serving.
Virginia's long, spindly fingers start to coil around, and she's like, I can imagine some programs already that I can put into effect that may be able to catch people coming in. I can assure you, before Eric Summers decided to take up his new profession of prankster, I had given him the job of scouring the sewers for Sabat. And he assured me, though I don't know how much merit I can give him, he assured me that the sewers are free of Sabat at this point.
Good to know. My contacts and resources tell me that perhaps the middle-class district of New Sarum is housing one of the notorious enemies of our sect. If you hear any news, Miss Lucas, of this Yanis character or the infamous Apollo, it will be best if we narrow down our search and get rid of these menaces once and for all.
She nods.
Just on the subject of Janus, Ramsey actually, when he hears you mentioning his name, reaches across the table and sort of nods at you and pulls the copy of the Old Statesman back towards himself. Forgive me, and he kind of flicks through. It's one of maybe the third or fourth page. It's quite near the front. A story regarding the Mary of the Project's restoration project, and he turns it back towards you. And it's talking about the mystery magician, etc., and how children have been going missing from near his performances on several occasions. I'm told that this gentleman fits the description, and there is actually a photograph there in the article who matches the description of Janus of those who've seen him.
I have the local police of New Sarum scouring the city for these two miscreants. Not to engage, we do not want another masquerade breach, but to note down their locations so we can triangulate where they may sleep during the day. So far, they have been less than useful.
Your hands will have been full, and you'll see many of the other pages are full of stories of renewed gang violence, and it's as if there's been another explosion of guns onto the streets. Perhaps they are being kept busy in other ways. Nonetheless, we must continue to do our duty.
Anarchs once again stop any real work being done with their frivolous mucking about.
Yes, sometimes I wonder. They seem to not be able to see even the small picture, let alone the big one.
They're so blinded by their own self-righteous condemnation that they don't understand the hot water they're in. Well, one has to always deal with the ignorant and the foolish.
Yes, yes. A good friend of mine once said to me that the Anarchs are somewhat like a baby who wants to play with fire. They have no concept of how badly burned they may get until it happens. And their elder putting up that gate around the glowing, warm, pleasing fire, to them at that moment is the enemy. And yet little do they know the pain and suffering they have been spared by their enemy.
You know, there was a Tremere in the city by the name of, I'm sure you know, he's quite, his reputation does precede him, even in the Americas, Alexander Page, who was very much an advocate of a great conflagration, a purging of the Anarchs from our street. A little heavy-handed, but one has to imagine the merit of a city free of such adolescent behaviour.
Yes, perhaps not with fire and blood, but with the judicious use of blood perhaps, but not so much the fire. They can be brought to see the light and brought into the fold wholesale. It will be a long operation, but what are we if not law?
If only they adhered to the prince's new subjugation to a Primogen. At least then someone can keep an eye on them and be held responsible for their actions. I'm sure many of them have many uses.
Perhaps that is an issue for the seneschal to consider and to put before the prince, since he will not lower himself to our presence. The matter of those who will not submit themselves to a Primogen. An example must be made, lest this pronouncement will be meaningless. A scourge must be named.
I do have one question regarding the sheriff. I wish to make a complaint that the sheriff has shot one of my fellow Nosferatu unprovoked.
He shot him.
Yes, with a gun in the park.
In the middle of the park, Primogen Brody, in front of mortal witnesses, this rabid dog of a sheriff is unworthy of the title.
He shot a kindred in full view of the public.
Yes, he confronted one of my fledglings and asked what this person can do for the city. I said for him not to worry about it, for that is my authority, and that if this person does end up being useless, then he'll know of that through me. The words were continued to be exchanged between the sheriff and this other person, like children fighting. Like, I don't have to say anything to you, and yes, you have to answer my question. And then the sheriff, out of pure anger, took a gun out and shot him in the chest. He did not file charges or follow up on this at all. We merely dispersed before the authorities, the mortal authorities, could come. As far as I know, this sheriff is still a sheriff.
Ramsay looks irritated by this news.
So, as long as the prince keeps the sheriff and has confidence in the sheriff, I have to have zero confidence in the prince.
That seems to please him, though, that last statement. But he still bears a face much like your paladin there. And he sort of looking across the table thoughtfully. It is not unexpected for, well, fledglings such as you've described to get overzealous, but for the sheriff of the city they must rise above such things. A scourge must be named.
Well, she continues to unconsciously twiddle her fingers. The Nosferatu have a way of peering out of the shadows when you least expect it, but we prefer not to have to live in the shadows. And as long as this sheriff continues to have authority, I'm afraid that we are going to have to keep our head down.
Let me just see how far he's going to go. Oh, very far. A 1 on the chance dice, well done. Ramsay looks actually quite angry, and he kind of leans forward on the table and sort of looks very meaningful and purposeful. You will have the full support of Clan Tremere in this petition. We cannot allow an embarrassment of a sheriff. It is bad enough that the court wallows in self-aggrandizing nonsense and avoids contact with all kindred, leaving their role to be performed by the Primogen Council. Must have order. And then he sits back in his chair and seems to sort of relax a bit again. We will support your petition. The sheriff must face at least some form of punishment. I imagine being stripped of the title would be fitting, and yet it may be that our prince will, in refusing such a request, reveal himself to be the pondersome oaf many of us believe him to be.
She's not. Virginia puts forth a proposal that all the Primogen put forth a declaration of non-confidence in the sheriff to the prince.
Ramsay sort of nods his head in agreement. I would be prepared to back this motion.
As am I.
Excellent.
And you informed your clan brethren that the Ventru and Tremere will not allow you to be marginalised in any way by the court of this city. You will have the strong role that befits the status of Clan Nosferatu.
And I suggest that we put out that we regard the sheriff as a combatant, and that if you find out where he's at, let me know, and I will do likewise. In other words, we can roll on him.
Ramsay sort of ponders this for a moment. We must be careful not to lower ourselves to his level, but if he will not go quietly, then he will go nonetheless.
I am merely stating that information is better than ignorance, as opposed to potential enemies. So if I knew where he was at some time or the other, I can help protect my clan better. And if I knew the Tremere and the Ventru are with me, who knows what we can accomplish together in this matter.
Yes, you can certainly count on our support, and I'm sure Mr. Stanhope will speak for his own clan.
Of course. Our three clans, when working together, there is very little we can't accomplish. It pleases me that we have come to such an accord.
Indeed, very little that we cannot accomplish. Our three clans together. Ramsay sort of strokes his chin. I believe the days of this plastic court may be numbered and replaced with something more fitting.
Yet there is only the three of us. There are other Primogen concerned that they are not here to share our accord.
Indeed. But I'm sure they can be spoken with. I understand the title of Malkavian Primogen to be either unoccupied or their Primogen to be somewhat missing. Is this the case?
As far as I'm aware, Mr. Connells has retreated into some sort of fugue-like state. He is currently being cared for, but his ability to make public appearances is exceedingly limited.
Ramsay sort of nods thoughtfully. There is a Malkavian in the city who I encountered recently, a man of some taste. You would like him, Mr. Stanhope. But I believe if we could maneuver him into the seat, he would back us.
Who is this Malkavian you speak?
A gentleman by the name of Victor Travers.
And what's his profession?
He seems to have some sort of involvement at the local museum in the historic district. Exactly what that involvement is, I cannot say, but he indicated to me that he lived nearby, therefore I imagine him to be a man of some means. He was certainly reasonably well dressed. But, as I say, stacking the Primogen Council in our favour right now would be the best, and with the three of us in such an accord as we are, we require only one further vote to sway any vote.
Yes, the Malkavians would be a suitable ally. They are weak within the city after the reign of the madman Wraith, and are looking for any allies. However, over-reliance on a single vote has led to, in the past, people turning.
Indeed. But it seems to me that it would at least be the beginning of our little empire, shall we say, if we begin to stack the deck in our favour.
Just so. The Toreador are curiously absent. Their Primogen is unpredictable, but there are many within his clan that I consider an ally.
I must admit I have only met two Toreador out with the Primogen, and neither of whom I have seen for some time. A shame. The Gentleman Codex may have been one to target as a cat's paw, someone who we could have manoeuvred into place.
John smiles a little, knowing full well that Codex has always been his cat's paw for quite some time. Perhaps.
Until such times, though, we must rely on our own abilities. And with the three of us in such good humour this evening, perhaps it would be wise to in some ways formalise this arrangement between us three for now.
A formal alliance between the three clans?
Indeed, but only known to we three. It would be best if, when people speak to a Nosferatu of the Tremere, they do not realise they are also speaking to the Tremere, if you know what I mean. And likewise, if someone has a complaint about the Nosferatu, we may make it clear that we would be who they should speak to about it. I shall see that my clan is not publicly friendly in their pronouncements, but do know that you have the backing of the clan. But what it will accomplish is, those wishing to rally support against either one of us will approach one of the other two for support, and in this way we will always be kept informed. I was considering formalising it in the style, so to speak, of a, shall we say, secret coterie. One whose overarching aims will be clear in the name, which shall be the administration. Between we three, we must bring down this court and build a new one.
John will steeple his fingers, very pleased with how the meeting has gone, how quickly it's developing, but will look poignantly at Miss Lucas.
Virginia, she stops twiddling her fingers, and she says, yes, but as I said, there's only the three of us. There's so many other to be represented.
Yes, and I'm sure with our mix of talents, we can bring the others into line with our way of thinking, and our little group will begin to grow until we are ready.
A small step, but every long journey takes but one small step. Like a single brick, Miss Lucas, creates an entire cathedral. Help us construct something that will last throughout the centuries. He'll stand and he'll hold out his hand quite dramatically.
Okay, Virginia stands, and she takes the hand with her claw.
Yeah,
She
Ramsay,
states, "To a new foundation."
Ramsay stands up also, and since he's got nobody to offer his hand to, he just places his hand on top of the hand and claw united, and sort of presses down on it in a sort of shaking gesture as best he can, and the three stand sort of joined at the wrist, so to speak.
And with that, I think that's a good point to end the scene.